What is up, everyone? So I made a vote on Instagram. We could either learn about how to put together a workout template or how to put together macros, and vast majority of you guys voted for macros. So that is what I'm going to teach today. We have a lot on the board. I'm going to go through it slow, and this will be posted, so no need to get overwhelmed. You can go back and watch it as many times as you want, so you know what you're doing, and let's get started. So our first thing when we're talking about macros that a lot of people get confused about is how much should we take in, where is it coming from, and most of social media and marketing pushes us towards supplements. So we kind of have this pyramid of what should be our priority. At the bottom of our pyramid, which makes up the bulk of everything, whether you're wanting to gain muscle mass, lose fat, stay in a maintenance phase, is our energy balance. So how much energy are we expending compared to how much are we consuming? The next thing that we're looking at that is important on that pyramid is our macros. So are we getting in carbohydrates? Are we getting in fat? Are we getting in enough protein to sustain ourselves? The next thing is what time are we getting those in? Intermittent fasting is trying to get those in within 2 hours. We're looking at making sure that we're getting all of our calories in within a decent window. I'm not necessarily for intermittent fasting, depending on what you're doing. Some athletes might be great for. It's not what we're talking about today. Next on the list is food composition. I know that there's a lot going around right now about sugar and high fats and high carbohydrate foods. What we're looking at in terms of our primary goal being fat loss or muscle gain is not necessarily what the food is made up of, but how does it fit into our goal? Are we within our calorie balance? Are we within our energy balance? And then we're looking at, the really nitty gritty of what is our food made up of. And then at the very tip top is supplements. That is the very last thing that we worry about. If we are not getting in enough energy compared to what we are expending, if we're not getting in enough protein from our food, if we're not getting it all in within a just normal time throughout the day, and if we can't get it in from real food, then we're looking at adding in supplements. So that is the pyramid of what we're looking at today. Again, our primary focus is energy balance. So how do we calculate out our energy balance? How do we figure out how many calories we need on a daily basis? We first look at our basal metabolic rate. I have it written down as BMR. I use the Harris-Benedict formula. There are a few other formulas out there. This is just the one that I use. After you get a basis with a client or even yourself going, it's going to give us a general idea of where to start. Then you adjust as appropriate. There's two different formulas for men and for women. I am female, so I took the equation. So females, I'll start with males, sorry. Men, you're gonna do 66.47. You're gonna add that to 6.24 times your body weight, that is in pounds. Then you're gonna add that to 12.7 times your height, that is in inches, and then subtract it from 6.755 times your age, that's in years. I think that's a given. Females, you're gonna go 655.1, so quite a bit different number than the men. The decimal is over, so we are looking at hundreds here compared to just tens here. Plus 4.35 times weight, plus 4.7 times height, minus 4.7 times age. So I plugged in my numbers into this formula. I weigh 172 pounds. I am 72 inches tall, and I am 27 years old. That gives me my estimated BMR at 1,614.8 calories per day. I round that up to 1615. Your BMR is not your goal for calories. This is if you were to go into a coma and be laying in bed, this is the amount of calories that you need to sustain life with nothing else going on. Number 2 on the list. Now we're gonna figure out what our goal is. Are we in a eukaloric state? Do we want to maintain? Are we in a hypocaloric state? Do we want fat loss? Or are we in a hypercaloric state? Are we looking to gain muscle? So to figure out our eukaloric state, we take our BMR, calculated over here, times our activity level. Our activity level is over here on the left side. It's everything put out for you. Again, these are research numbers, sedentary to light individuals throughout your day. So what is your normal work day look like? Are you sitting most of the time? Are you walking a little bit, but you're not on your feet all day? That would be a sedentary to a light activity level lifestyle. That's 1.53. Moderate lifestyle, you're walking quite a bit, but it's not extremely strenuous. You're going to take that times 1.76. And then really heavy lifestyle. So are you a guy that, or woman, you're an individual that does a lot of really rigorous activity throughout the day, very hands-on, lots and lots of lifting and moving. Your lifestyle is 2.25. Our hypocaloric, our fat loss, you do that same BMR times activity, you subtract 500. Our hypercaloric, or our muscle gain, you take, again, your BMR times activity plus 500. Pretty simple. Number 3, we need to figure out what our demands are on days when we're working out compared to days when we're not working out. So we have our non-training days, or our light days. Not every day that you go to the gym is considered a workout day. I know that we want to think that every day we go into the gym, we're burning hundreds of calories. That's not always the case. If you're going in, you're just getting a quick little pump, probably not breaking a sweat. You're just there to get moving. That's a light day. Our calories are equal to our goal. On our training days, these are the days that you're going in there. It's over a half an hour of real true work. That's not, I go in and I hit a set, I walk around, I talk, I mess on my phone, and maybe come back, I hit a set, and you're there for 2 hours, but you were truly only working for 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. Your training days are your really, really tough days. Powerlifters, these are days that you're hitting above 80%. Bodybuilders, these are the days when you're hitting really big muscle groups. You're really, really sweating. If you're a runner, these are days when it's multiple miles. That is a training day. That is your BMR times our activity. So is it a moderate or heavy day? And then plus or minus 500 depending on your goal. Number 4, this is where all of our calculations come in. So I am currently hypercaloric. I am looking to put on weight. I want to gain weight. So my non-training days, or my light day calories, I take 1650/15, which is my BMR. My usual work day right now, especially being pregnant, I'm pretty sedentary. So I'm gonna take that times my light activity level, and I'm gonna add 500 because I'm trying to put on weight. So on non-training days, I'm eating just shy of 3,000 calories. On training days, I'm gonna take my BMR times moderate. Again, right now, I don't consider any of my workouts really, really strenuous. And I'm going to add 500. And I'm eating around 3,400 calories. Now say I wasn't pregnant, my goal isn't to gain weight. I would have a hypocaloric goal. This is when I'm trying to lose fat. So my non-training days, my light calorie days, my BMR, my work is still the same. I'm still sedentary to light, and I would subtract 500. I'm eating just shy of 2,000 calories. On training days, my BMR times my moderate activity level minus 500, and I'm eating around 2,300 to 2,400 calories. Something that's interesting that's on here is you don't see me eating an extreme deficit. So I'm not eating 1,200 calories. If you download any type of tracking app to track your calories and you put in your goal and you let it calculate everything for you and say your goal is weight loss, Most of them will push you right at 1,200 calories. On my training days, I'm eating over 1,000 calories more than that, okay? So this is where these calculations are so important, and why if you don't feel comfortable doing these calculations, getting a coach is so important. All right, after this, I'm gonna erase a whole lot. So if you need any of this other information, rewind the video, go write it down. All right, so now we have our calorie goals. What do we eat in those calorie goals? Next, after our energy balance, which is our calories, next we have our macros. So first thing that is the most important, in my opinion, and in most professionals' opinions, is our protein intake. How much protein do we want? Studies show us that 0.6 grams per pound of mass is the minimum that we need just to maintain muscle mass. Most of us aren't trying to do the bare minimum to maintain. And so if we are in a caloric deficit, so hypocaloric, we're looking at fat loss, we want to keep as much muscle mass as humanly possible. So our protein goal for that day, so our hypocaloric goal for protein, I just messed up, whatever. We're gonna look at 1 to 1.5 grams per pound. So I weigh 172 pounds. I tend to stick toward the 1 gram per pound. So 1 gram per pound, I would be eating 172 grams of protein. If we're looking at hyper, it's not as difficult to maintain muscle mass when you're in a hypercaloric state, when you're in a surplus. So we don't need quite as much protein, and it's kind of fun because we can get our calories from other sources, our carbohydrates or our fats. So we're looking at 0.8 to 1 gram per pound. For me, I tend to do the 0.8, that would be about 136 grams of protein per day. That is typically where I stop. Most of my clients, I don't give carbohydrate or fat goals to. However, some people do want carbohydrate and fat goals. So then we'll get into that. If you're eucaloric, you can really do either of these. Your 1 pound, or 1 gram per pound, you're really not gonna mess up too much on. Anything more than the 1.5, you're in quite a bit of a protein surplus. Our body does not require that much. It doesn't utilize that much. And then we're looking at kind of a mess for our kidneys. So that old school 2 grams per pound really isn't necessary. Carbohydrates. All right, how many grams of carbs should we eat? It really depends on the person. That's why I typically don't program that for many individuals. Really, the best diet or nutrition that we can give to anybody is something that they're going to stick to. So I am a heavy carbohydrate eater. If you give me a diet that requires me to eat high fat and low carbs, I'm probably not going to stick to it very well. Just like somebody who's used to eating high fat and low carbs, if you give them a high carbohydrate diet and low fat, they're probably not likely to stick to it. Adherence is our biggest thing when we're looking at reaching our goals. If you really, really want it, on days when you're not training, our carbohydrate goal is 0.5, around 0.5 to 1 grams per pound. That's a non-training day to light day. And then on training days, we're looking at 1 to 2 grams per pound. After we get that figured out, whatever is left over, that's your fat goal for the day. I don't calculate out fat before carbohydrates. I always do carbohydrates first. So there's our macros. And then last thing, how do we figure out when to adjust our calories? So if you want fat loss, and we started out, I just erased it. We're starting out with fat loss on training days. What did I have? Around 2,300 calories. And my training days, I'm hitting my calories. My non-training days, I'm hitting my calories. I'm hitting my protein. When do I know how to change my numbers? First, we're gonna look at, so this is number 6, adjusting the scale. Our primary goal is always to see 1 to 1.5 pounds of change, either hyper or hypo. So if we're looking for fat loss, our goal is to see 1 to 1.5 pounds of weight loss, fat loss, per week. I assess every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I'd look for 2 to 3 pounds down on the scale. This is if you do not have access to something where you can see how your muscle mass and your fat loss is changing. We're looking just strictly at the scale, 2 to 3 pounds in 2 weeks. If we haven't lost that, if I'm not down to 170, so I started at 172, if I'm not down to at least 170 in 2 weeks, I need to adjust my macros. How do I do that? First, we take away from our training days. So my training day, I would subtract 100 calories. So I'm eating around 2,200 calories on my training days. My non-training days, I'm still eating just under 2,000. Another 2 weeks go by, I'm still not seeing that weight loss like I want. So I'm still not down to 172, 169 to 170. I'm still sticking around 172. Next, I take away from my non-training days, or my light days, I take away 50 calories. My protein is still always the same. So because we're on fat loss, I'm still eating 172 grams of protein. No matter what. That number does not change, no matter how much you are changing these numbers. Okay? So say that elicits the fat loss that I'm looking for. I'm down to 169 pounds now. I go 2 weeks. I'm down to 167 pounds. I go 2 weeks, still on these same calories. And now I'm still stuck at 167. I repeat the same process. I first take 100 calories away from my training days. If I'm still stuck the next week, or in 2 weeks, then I'm taking 50 calories away from my non-training days. All right, so let's do this. If you're trying to put on muscle mass, it is the same exact thing, just kind of in reverse. So we're still looking at per 2 weeks, 1 to 1.5 pounds of increasing, or 2 to 3 pounds per 2 weeks. If I'm not seeing that, if 2 weeks go by and I'm still 172, maybe I'm 173, so it went up a pound in 2 weeks, but we're not quite where we want to be. We're not quite gaining fast enough. Then we're looking at increasing first on training days. Now we get 100 calories more. Protein is still staying at 136 grams because we're in a surplus, so our protein can be a little bit lower. It's easier to maintain muscle. I get stuck, I'm not improving. So my non-training days, Now we increase 50 calories, and we're seeing everything we want. Now, the next week, all of a sudden, not only am I up to 174 to 175, which would be my goal, all of a sudden my body reacts and bam, I'm at 178 pounds. That is not within our range that we want, so we're up a little bit too high. So now I take away the last thing that I added. So now I would take away 50 calories on my non-training days or my light days. Okay, so if you are seeing that progress in too great of increments, you just take away the last thing that you did. Same thing if you're in a deficit. Say you weren't seeing progress, you took away 100 calories, you're still not seeing that weight loss, you took away 50 calories, and the next week all of a sudden you're down 8 pounds. You would add that 50 calories back in, see where you are. It's really just a guessing game. We're trying to figure out what our body is doing, and it's a lot of numbers playing. So that is how we're figuring out our energy balance to meet our goals. And then the last thing that I tell all of my clients, I have really just 2 rules outside of that. We are trying to consume quite a bit of our carbohydrate goal around our workouts or around our most active times of the day. So if you're not working out that day, when is your most active time that day? Is it in the middle of your workday? Is that when you're the most active? That's when we're trying to eat most of our carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are a fast-acting energy. So when we're moving, they're the thing that's in our body, in our muscles, that's turning over really fast energy that's readily available. Our fats are the complete opposite. They're our slow guys. They're the ones that are there that when our carbohydrates, they really both show up to the party at the same time, but the carbohydrates start partying right away. The fats ease into the party. So our fats are a longer lasting energy source, and that's not necessarily what we need right away when we're doing heavy activity. So our fats are great in the mornings, they're great at night, when our activity level is a little bit lower. So my other rule is our fats, we keep them away from our workouts for the most part. Around 5 to 6, maybe 8 grams of fat. Totally okay, not a big deal. Other than that, we're keeping our fats away from our workouts. We don't want that slow digestion. We want really fast acting energy, and we want to get nutrients into the muscle belly as fast as possible. So those are my rules. Not too terrible. If you have any questions over any of this, don't hesitate to reach out. I know it can seem overwhelming. There's a lot of just gameplay, and I've been doing this. I've been playing with macros since about 2012. So going on 7 years, and it is still just a game. It's figuring out what your body is going to respond best to, how we're going to elicit the change that we want. Anytime that you're in a calorie deficit, this is another big one real quick. Anytime that we're in a calorie deficit, this is not meant to be chronic. So we're not chronic dieters. We're looking at 8, maybe 12 weeks of dieting, of being in a caloric deficit. After that, we're gonna take it back up to maintenance. We're gonna take it back up maybe into a muscle gain phase. Give our bodies a break. That way we're not looking at muscle or metabolic damage. We're not looking at that resistance. Anything longer than that, then we get into worrying about is our body fighting back against us, because we're essentially not giving it enough food. And we don't want to do that. We don't want it to think that we're starving it. That's why we're still getting, that's why on workout days, even when I'm in a cut, I'm getting 2,300 calories because when I get a whole lot lower than that, if I get around 1200, my body starts to think that I'm starving. And it goes way back to the days of when humans were starving, when we were scavenging for food, when food wasn't readily available. We're looking back towards that, and that's not our goal. That's not what we want. We want to elicit change with the least amount of effort possible, essentially. So that is where we're coming from. After 12 weeks, start to bump it back up. Always start in a maintenance phase, because if you can lose fat at maintenance calories, that means that we don't have to cut quite so low. That means that you get more food and you get to lose weight. Why wouldn't we want that? So always start at maintenance phase. Same thing goes for if you're trying to put on muscle mass. Again, if you can increase muscle mass with the same amount of calories as maintenance, that's wonderful. I know that 4,000 calories sounds wonderful until you actually have that as a goal every day, and then it's pretty miserable. So you guys can do it. Let me know if you have any questions. If you want somebody to do this for you and to play around with it for you, who has 7 years of experience doing this, reach out to me. I would love to be your coach.